Okay, ready?
Oh yeah, let me get a sip of my Sharona. Do you need the caffeine or is that decaf?
This is caffeine, yeah.
All right.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Country Dog, City Dog, episode 12, gerrymandering. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to Country Dog, City Dog. My name is Kevin Levy.
And I'm Don Merrill.
And today we're going to talk about gerrymandering. And does it even cause a rural divide, an urban-rural divide? And if so, is there a way to help to heal this divide?
Gerrymandering is a noun and it's a verb. Because of pronunciation differences, it might be produced gerrymandering in New England or perrymandering in Texas. Some people say perrymandering for Governor Rick Perry. But gerrymandering is what it is. It's a way that political boundaries and borders are manipulated so as to favor one party or another. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, gerrymandering first occurred when minorities were given the right to vote. Legislative bodies used gerrymandering to ensure that political power of these voters, they were diminished. And so what we have is, if you look at states and you look at the political boundaries that are drawn, you're going to see the most awkward lines that are drawn to represent communities that are literally ripped apart. They're cracked, they're broken open, and it's creating an unfair circumstances where people in your community are not being represented by the people that you want to vote for.
You know, they have different kinds of terms for the same thing. Like, some people don't call gerrymandering because that's just too ugly of a term. They call it redistricting. That's sort of the sanitized version. But, you know, in redistricting or gerrymandering or whatever you want to call it, there's cracking and packing. Okay, so cracking is when you take a district and you break it open, like what Kevin was talking about, and you redistribute the people who are inside that district to other districts to dilute their voting power or to strengthen the voting power of an adjoining district. Packing is where you take those people that you just moved and you put them someplace else to where they're now concentrated. So cracking and packing. Gerrymandering is also used to protect incumbents, like people who are already in the job. Districts can be drawn, you know, in two ways. One, to force incumbents to run against each other. Now, that's something that a legislature can do if it wants to sort of dilute the voting strength of both incumbents, of two people who are in neighboring districts. What you can do is you can redraw the districts so that they now have to run against each other. I think that's something like what happened with Adam Schiff and Pat Schroeder, I think. Now, Pat Schroeder, I think, is leaving the legislature, the California legislature, because of her health. But if that wasn't the case, then the way the district lines have been drawn, Adam Schiff would have to run against Pat Schroeder. And I think that was not a desirable situation for the Democrats. That's not what they wanted.
Yeah, you know, gerrymandering, no matter where you live, will affect you. And we live, you know, Oregon is clearly a very democratic state, but for example, there is Texas. Texas is very Republican. But we'll start with Oregon. Can you imagine if, you know, there are so many conservative folks that live out in Eastern Oregon that if they might feel like they don't have a voice, they don't get their voice heard and implemented into action, because sometimes their boundaries have been diluted so much that it just doesn't make sense. Let me put it another way. Imagine being here in Portland, and our legislative body was a Republican majority legislators that decided, how can we dilute Portland's vote. I've got an idea. And again, this is happening all over the United States. We're going to take Portland and we're going to carve out a section of southeast Portland and then connect it with a very rural community. And we're going to carve out northeast Portland and attach it to another part of Oregon that heavily votes conservative. What you're now doing is diluting the strength of Portland's liberal base and turning it into a very conservative voting bloc that no matter how much Portland votes, we are now divided, and Portland becomes it can become, if we have a Republican district, legislative branch, it could become a Republican led voting representatives.
Well, and that's exactly what has happened in other places.
Absolutely, Texas and Florida and everywhere else, and California and other. It happens on both sides of the party.
I can tell you though that for a lot of conservative voters, they're like, "Yay!" Because Portland has had the Oregon legislature has had a supermajority of progressive Democrats for so long, and the Republican and conservative voters in the state, they're like, "There's no reason for me to vote because I know that all Portland's going to do is steamroll me anyway." But now that the election has sort of like brought the legislature more into balance, both sides have to talk to each other now. The Democrats can't feel like it doesn't matter what the Republicans want, we're still going to get our way, and the Republicans no longer feel like, well, I don't have a voice. And that's the way politics should be. There should be more of a dialogue. It would be nice if everybody in politics and everybody sitting in the legislative chamber was nice and friendly, but it's a fist fight. That's what it is. Politics is a fist fight. And so, you fight it out. That's just how it is. And at the end, you come to a compromise, or the people who last the longest win. I don't know. But it can't be where one side feels completely smashed all the time and the other side feels like they're justified in doing the smashing. But the other thing I wanted to say about redistricting here in Oregon, that just happened. Oregon just went through a big redistricting thing. Former Governor Brown, signed a new congressional map into law about a year and a half ago. And, there were no votes. There was no court-ordered redrawing or approvals from the Secretary of State. In other words, even in the middle of a supermajority by Democrats, Republicans, they participated. But the reason they participated was because they didn't really trust the Democrats to do what they said they would do, and so they wanted to watch the process, They did file a lawsuit, but the Oregon Supreme Court dismissed it. So what happened was, this was like the first redistricting, after the 2020 census, and if you look at the old map of Oregon's legislative districts and the new map, it looks like that the districts that were highly competitive between Republicans and Democrats were made more favoring Democrats. It's the 4th and 5th districts, and that's everything south of Portland to the border and east from the coast to Oregon's redrawn 2nd district. So it lost a chunk from the 3rd district, but gained a chunk of what used to be the 4th district in the south. I know it sounds complicated, just need to look at a map. You can see the difference. The 2nd district has changed a lot, and the 4th district has changed a lot.
Something that you're touching on right now that has actually bothered me to my core when it comes to who I'm going to vote for. I am independent registered, so I'm going to vote for whoever just makes the most sense. And Tina Kotek, when she was Speaker of the House, she made an agreement with the Republican minority saying, we will give you a seat at the table when it comes to redistricting if you stop the process of abandoning when it's time to come to votes. Like when you don't show up, it does not give. We do not have enough people there to create votes. So
right, not a quorum.
Correct. That's the word. Quorum. And so Tina Kotek made an agreement with them to say, hey, stop doing that, and we're going to give you a seat at the table. And when it came time, and so she got that agreement, both parties agreed, but when it finally came down to it, Tina Kotek, while running for governor, she went back on her word and decided, forget that, we're gonna draw the lines that are gonna heavily benefit and favor the Democrats in our state of Oregon. And I am sure a lot of Democrats in this state are applauding that move, but like, she went back on her word. To me, that sounds like untrustworthy. How can I vote for someone that's gonna go back on their word? Like, and yes, again, like, you might be excited about that, but other states are facing the same dilemma, and to have someone who's running for governor to give you your voice to go back on the word, to me, it just lost a lot of trust.
Well, I am sure that I have heard a news story related to that, but I haven't heard of that story in particular. I'll have to read up on that. And if that is true, as you describe it, then that'll be really disappointing. And disappointing is such a wimpy word. Really, when somebody does something like that, in your own life, when someone goes back on their word like that, and something you really depend on and something you trust them to do, you just want to go at them with a baseball bat. You do. So it's like, when it's disappointing, it's really aggravating. And so really all voters can do, the only thing voters can do, you can't kidnap people like they tried to do in Michigan with Governor Whitmer. Can't do that. You can't be shooting legislators, but what you can do is you can use your vote. And so, unfortunately, either you can recuse somebody when they're in office, you pull them out of office, but that's a big process, or you just have to wait until the next election. Unfortunately, those are the only tools we have as voters. They're big tools, but we can only use them at certain times. I wanted to go back to talking about this redistricting. Now, like what Kevin just said, about the trust and, the violation of trust, if it happened, the way he describes it, it's part of the reason why, these redistrictings, are so significant, because the second district, which is where most of eastern and southern Oregon is, big old chunk, more than 50% of the state, a lot of those folks believe in the Greater Idaho movement.
Yes.
And, those folks, it would include a lot of the new second district. So, you can't, like I said, we have tools that are limited tools, but we can use them. When we use them, they really have an effect. And this Greater Idaho movement has been moving very, very slowly, but it's been like picking up communities. People who are like, we're sick of metropolitan, west of the Cascades dictating our lives. And so these redistricting maps, they're sort of like a canary in the coal mine to that.
Yeah, when politicians, when Congress has sometimes an approval rating in the teens, anywhere from I've seen 12 to 19%, and yet they have a re-election rate of somewhere floating around 80 to 90%. We know that system is broken. That's broken when it's so low, yet re-election is so high. And gerrymandering in the state of Oregon and in the state of every state, it's not fair, and it's creating folks to not believe in the system, not trust the system. I feel a way to help smooth some of this divide when it comes to gerrymandering is to create an independent, fully transparent, independent redistricting commission that will follow guidelines and draw accurate representation of voters regardless of their political party. Like, gerrymandering, it's political thievery, and it's allowing legislators and politicians to represent people that should not belong in their district. And so when people feel like they're being represented by someone who does not believe in the same ideologies as they do, and there's no way to get around it, creating an independent redistricting commission to help redraw boundaries that are unbiased and fair would be a great first step.
Well, the redrawing of those districts by commissions happens a lot of times, it seems, in states where both parties agree to the redistricting commission. But if you have a state where the majority is one party or another, they're not going to agree to give that power up. They're going to be the ones to redraw the
So it
districts.
almost needs to be, because I agree, if only some states agree to an independent redistricting commission and redraw on the lines that are fair and balanced, but some states don't, then it'll create an unfair advantage to some and create the gerrymandered effects that helps Congress, gain political power of one party. So what needs to happen, and will it ever, that it needs to happen all at once. All 50 states need to adopt a redistricting at once. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. If California and New York are like, you know what, you're right, like we are now going to create fair boundaries, but then other states like Texas and Florida and Ohio are like, nope, we're going to still stick to it, then it's pointless because nothing will get changed.
I love you, optimistic crazy man. I don't know how you would get the entire country. I mean, what you're talking about is something that's on like a constitutional convention level, And, for a country that could not ratify the Equal Rights Amendment that represented 50% of the population, I don't know how you would get something like that done.
I feel, again, we've talked about this in previous episodes, educating the public on how divisive gerrymandering can be and just making sure that they only vote for elected representatives that will believe and institute gerrymandering.
Well, you had talked about how people get, they aren't represented by people who they should be represented by. Another thing that happens with gerrymandering, they call it kidnapping. And that's where lines are redrawn so that somebody who was representing a district is now moved into a new district where they don't know anybody. And that representation that their old district had is now gone. I mean, that's the kind of mean stuff that gets done, when one party wants to either dilute the power or discredit the representatives or whatever. Something else that happens is prison-based gerrymandering, okay, where you have prisoners who don't have a legal right to vote while they're incarcerated, but they're counted as part of a district's population in order to try to either crack or pack a district. I mean, how underhanded is that, What gerrymandering does, the worst thing that gerrymandering does is it wastes votes. Because now, a district that's flipped politically, they don't have anybody in that district that they want to vote for. So, they may file a protest vote or they may stay at home, Ideally, the people who are doing the gerrymandering, they want those people to flip over to them, But, when you do that, you have pissed off a lot of people, And so those people just assume stay home.
Right. I was just reading, I was just curious, what are the top 10 states that are the most heavily gerrymandered? Here's what I came up with. Top 10 in no particular order. North Carolina, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Louisiana, Utah, Texas, Arkansas, and Ohio. Each one of those states, according to this research poll, and I'm sorry I did not pull up where this article came from, but please do your research yourself, but those 10 states are the most...
We kind of have a little bit of responsibility to do that research too. So
Yes.
in future episodes, like if people want to know where we got our sources from, we can certainly include that when we use, when we talk about something that we say is factual or we got it from a source, we will certainly be willing to tell you where that source was.
And in this particular moment, it was not. But, point being, when we have so many states, and that list that I just gave you was a mix of Republican and Democrat-led states. So by no means is it favoring one party or another. In fact, it's actually said that for the last redistricting cycle that we just had, where all new states drew new boundaries, which happens approximately every 10 years, because some states were so heavily gerrymandered to favor one party and other states also favoring the other party, it ended up kind of equaling itself out.
I know, wasn't that weird?
It kind of balanced itself out.
It's like the first time in memory where states are practically balanced, and they didn't even mean to do it.
Right. Yeah, Ron DeSantis in Florida was ruthless when it came to gerrymandering. His entire redistricting state legislators kept on giving him a map and saying, this is what we got, let's put it in the law. And Ron DeSantis was like, nope, we can do better, let's gerrymander even more. and then they came back to him and they were able to squeeze in one more Republican-led district, and Ron DeSantis is like, nope, come back to me until you can get another. And if you look, it went back and forth so many times before finally Florida, even though it's almost a 50-50, although the last election cycle was a little more heavily favored towards Republicans, but in general, Florida is almost a 50-50, but if you look at the representation, by no means is it.
Yeah, it's like, these attempts at gerrymandering in different states have led to this more balanced electorate, and it's happening because, many of the district boundaries ended up counterbalancing the gerrymandering efforts of other legislators in other districts.
Right.
So, we're sort of like in a good place, even though we don't really know how we got here, because everybody was really acting in their own interest, but in the end it turned out to be a pretty good thing in the wider picture. Something else about gerrymandering is that politicians who are in safe seats, they don't have any fear of opposition outside their district, and so they have less incentive to represent their constituents. So gerrymandered legislators are who are in really strong seats. They may even be less representative of the people that they are now seeing. And they don't really necessarily need the votes, because the way the district is set up, it's like there's no way they're going to lose.
Right. That right there sometimes is the most frustrating, and that right there, I feel, causes the most extreme of politicians, because exactly like you said, they have nothing to lose. And so when a politician knows they're going to get reelected, then they can be as extreme as they want. That favors maybe a small group of extremists, and they know because of gerrymandering, like, they're in.
And this is a discussion about rural and urban districts. This is one of those topics that absolutely covers both automatically. And packing and cracking is especially common in districts with high minority communities. Voting power can either be concentrated in one politically homogeneous district, only such that representation is always outvoted and overwhelmed, or voting power can be in a homogeneous voting community and divided so that those voters don't have enough power to even elect the representative they want. And the other thing about gerrymandering, which is bad, is that gerrymandering is sometimes done in secret, right? When I'm from Ohio, but Ohio Republicans, when they were redistricting in 2012, when they were planning to do their redistricting, they went to redistricting training, and the motto of that training was keep it secret, keep it safe. In the same year, the Center for the Public Integrity graded 24 of 50 states, half of the states, a D to F for transparency. So the Congress has introduced transparency legislation several times to address the redrawing of congressional districts. Surprise, it's gone nowhere. So, so it's like, how do you combat it? How do you fight it? One way is, you let legislators, instead of letting legislators draw their own lines, like Kevin was saying, got to establish boundary commissions. They're the ones, like maybe they're made up of retired judges or people who were formerly on ethics boards, and they tend to look at population distribution rather than, the political environment. So that's one way.
Right. It would be interesting to read upon the states that I wish I knew. Are there states right now that are using an independent redistricting commission in its entirety for the entire state, and to see how well it's doing, if both rural and urban folks are feeling more connected to their representative at all?
I don't know. I'm sure there are, because the fact that commissions are being talked about as often as they are shows that people are not really satisfied when a legislature has a supermajority like Oregon did.
Right.
Because then obviously it's not fair. But you got to look at the reason why that happens. It happens because one side got tired of being told by the other side what to do, So then the election shifts and, legislature. So hopefully what happens is, in those states that are being heavily gerrymandered, the same thing will happen there, like what happened in Oregon. to where the legislature becomes more balanced, right? The people respond to that,
Right.
you know?
Over time, because it happens every 10 years, what happens sometimes in gerrymandered districts is communities shift, and what might be a one heavily liberal district at first can slowly start to become left of center, and then right of center, and so sometimes gerrymandering comes back to bite you in the end because you do not follow a simple basic guideline of just creating unbiased lines. And
You know, there's something called fixed districts, you know, and fixed districts are one way to help stop gerrymandering because, you know, on the surface it might seem simple, but the issues or the inequities that exist in these districts will still remain, right? So it's like if you had a district that never changed, the boundary lines never changed, then you knew that that district would never change. Its boundaries would never, they would always remain the same. But, you know, like the problem with this district is like what Kevin was saying, populations shift. So district lines stay the same, but the population within that district gets redistributed. So, you know, at some point, the political leaders are like, boy, I wish we could change the district around more favorably to us, less favorably to them. And the other side might be thinking the same thing, but they can't do anything because the districts are fixed. Right. So that's an advantage and a disadvantage of like the fixed district system.
yeah, you know, no matter where you live, urban, suburban, rural, gerrymandering plays a part. It's a legal way to rig an election in favor of politicians, and honestly, I feel no one should just put up for it. And maybe start looking on the ballot, read the candidate's pamphlet on who believes that gerrymandering is a divisive procedure, that they vote in favor of creating independent districts, and maybe start voting for those candidates.
You know, another way that districts can be drawn, like right now, like Kevin was saying, some gerrymandered districts, you know, have these really weird shapes. And so, you know, there have been these attempts, you know, to use math to redraw districts into these like polygon shapes so that, you know, all the land area is taken up, but each district is sort of like geometrically the same shape. And so, and about the same size. So there's really no way, you know, using that kind of an algorithm to cheat. And drawing district-related shape algorithms, you know, they end up being more mathematically equal, but the problem with these, again, is that population tends to shift. And, you know, would it be politically better to keep similar groups together, you know, or split them up, you know? Because there again, the politician is trying to create an atmosphere, you know, a conscientious politician is trying to create an atmosphere where his constituents feel represented and then they're going to feel supported. But if they don't feel represented, they're not going to feel supported. And if they're split up, they're not going to feel represented or supported.
Right. To our listeners out there, in Oregon and beyond, we're all around. Do you live in a gerrymandered district? Do you feel represented in your district? We would love to hear from you regarding this. If you want to go to countrydogcitydog.fm and write to us and let us know if you are in a gerrymandered district and are you okay with it? Are you even noticing any effects by the policies that are being put out by someone that you feel does not represent you and your community's beliefs?
You know, and there's something else you can do. You can go to this website that I found called Dave's Redistricting App. Basically what it is, it's sort of a game. You enter in your district and it shows you what your district would look like if you could gerrymander it any way you wanted. And so, you know, this is sort of like, this was a tool that was created to sort of give people a sense of what that power feels like, and it shows the unintended consequences of gerrymandering.
Great.
So with that said, we're out of time. So Kevin, it's been invigorating.
Don, thank you so much, and thank you all for listening. This is Country Dog, City Dog.
I'm Don Merrill.
And I'm Kevin Levy.
Cool. So what'd you think?
Great, man. Another tough subject that we were able to get through. I was just I was listening while driving here today. I was just listening to talk radio, and all it really was is just people just talking and almost like reading the news and sharing opinions, and none of it was powerful and like, oh my God, or enlightening or anything like that. But I know they're reaching millions of listeners on these stations, and I just feel what we're doing, we can contend to anything that's out there.
Well, I don't know.
We'll never know until it gets out there and we see. Like we could just think and hope and feel, but until
When I report a story, when I do a story, my assumption is that I'm telling somebody something they don't know, or I'm telling them something that's helpful, or I'm giving them information that I don't think they have, that they can use in their own life to make their own life better. I don't know what this is.
oh my gosh, every episode we have, we are talking about information that I would say, I have no idea if it's majority or a minority of listeners are like, oh, I didn't know that. Like even this gerrymandering, I guarantee someone's gonna learn something new, and I have friends that have no clue what gerrymandering is at all. It's not a very common topic, and I feel like someone's gonna walk away and be like, interesting, different takes, thank you. And
I hope so.
yeah, I hear your concern.
There's an old joke in radio, it's like, you don't know, talking into a microphone is a lot like